Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 163. Shizun and Buletengui. As one of the 20 or so participants who were hunting the spiritual deer in the forest grounds, Xuemeng also had a Zhenlong chess piece implanted in his body. They were like puppets that were unafraid of pain or death as they rushed together, slashing any ghosts or monsters with their swords, not allowing them to disrupt and destroy the array. However, they do not pay attention to any ghost or monster that was not within the vicinity of the array, allowing them to roam into the darkness of the night. The purpose of these chess pieces was obvious. They were there to guard the five elements formation. Seeing that his disciple was being controlled, Chu Wanning could not endure it any longer. When he was about to get up and rush out, Mo Ran suddenly stopped him. Chu Wanning gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Let go. Don't go out, yet. Wait for a little bit." "How can we wait?" "That is Xuemeng." Chu Wanning was too strong. Mo Ran could not stop him with one hand. He could only hold him tightly in his arms. He covered Chu Wanning's mouth with one hand. No matter how hard he struggled in his arms, he did not let go. Mo Ran whispered to him. His hot breath brushed against the back of his ear. "It is too risky to go out now. Don't be so impulsive. Shizun, please listen to me." Mo Ran was answered with an elbow. Chu Wanning pried open his hand and gasped. His eyes were full of anger. He said in a low voice, "Under the control of the Zhenlong chess formation, his spiritual power will be quickly depleted. There are ghosts around here. One small mistake and he will die." "He won't." Mo Ran grabbed his hand. His eyes were resolute and firm. "I know the Zhenlong chess formation. You have to trust me." Chu Wanning saw his serious expression. He could not help but be startled. His breathing slowly calmed down. At this instant, a strange howl came from afar. They quickly turned around and saw an evil spirit breaking through the air and pouncing on Xuemeng. Swoosh! His sword Long Cheng reflected the cold moonlight. Xuemeng's body was as light as a swallow and the blade instantly pierced through the evil spirit. A living person who was under the control of Zhenlong chess formation would have their spiritual energy gradually depleted until they would not be as good as before. But he's only under its control for a short period of time, so he'll be fine for now. Chu Wanning turned his head to look at him, a mark appearing between his eyebrows. "Why are you so sure about this?" "I learned about it during my travels." The evil spirit fell down and soon turned into ashes. Xuemeng held Long Cheng in his hand. Black drops of blood continuously flowed down the blade, creating a strange and crooked marks on the snow. The moonlight shone on his face. His expression was cold and his eyes were devoid of light. Mo Ran's heart clenched. Xuemeng had never been a chess piece in his previous life, just who was it? Suddenly, there was movement in the distance. Mo Ran turned his senses back to the present and said in a low voice, "It seems that someone is coming." Sure enough, two people came out of the forest and walked along the frozen lake towards the eye of the formation. The eye of the array was shining with a green light. One of them was holding a holy weapon in his hand, but because of the angle, Mo Ran could not see what the holy weapon was. The man broke the ice with his palm and threw the holy weapon into the eye of the formation. In an instant, the eye of the array shone brightly. The dark clouds moved away and the moon showed up from behind the thick clouds. The cold light shone on the ice and completely illuminated the two people guarding the eye of the formation. One of them was wearing a luxurious robe with golden silk, graceful and bright, but he was wearing a thick coat and a bamboo hat, so his face could not be seen clearly. The other one was barefoot in the frigid ground, but he didn't seem to mind the cold. The man raised his head and looked at the heavenly rift. Mo Ran's eyes widened in surprise. How is it possible? Su Xuanglin. He was extremely stunned and shocked. Su Xuanglin. Elder Xuanglin? He was Ye Wangzi's foster father. In his previous life, he used his own flesh and blood to protect Ye Wangzi and died by the sword intended for Ye Wangzi. How could it be him? Chu Wanning did not know that Mo Ran was that much shocked. He lightly patted Mo Ran's shoulder and said in a low voice, "Go. Why hasn't he appeared yet?" The man wearing the bamboo hat beside Su Xuanglin spoke. Mo Ran listened and realized that it was Nangong Liu's voice. Nangong Liu's voice was obviously anxious and gloomy. He could not help but curse, "Damn it, did you make a mistake?" Su Xuanglin said, "Let's wait and see. Hurry up. Make the heavenly rift bigger. I don't know when those guests will send people here. If we wait any longer, it will be too late." "I know. You're so impatient. Do you know whether heavenly rift can be made bigger? Last time in Kaidi town, it was because you were too impatient that the situation got out of hand and attracted the other great sects one after another. If you don't stay calm, you will fail again." Sigh. Su Xuanglin closed his eyes and said, "Sect leader, it was not easy for you to find these 5 holy weapons with different attributes that can absorb and accumulate the spiritual energy of cultivators. You've endured for so many years. How could you miss this single short night?" "You're right." Nangong Lu took a deep breath and nodded. "I've waited for 5 years. No, it's not just 5 years. From the day I became the sect leader of Rufeng sect, I've been waiting." He rubbed the thumb ring in his sleeve and his eyes flashed with a dark fire. Nangong Lu murmured, "I've been waiting." "You don't have to wait." All of a sudden, a stern male voice resounded throughout the frozen lake. It was like a bolt of lightnings breaking through the clouds, shocking the 2 people in the middle of the array as they look at each other. The moon was bright in the sky and the thousands of pine trees were rustling. A slender man stood on the treetops. He narrowed his shining phoenix eyes as his white robe billowed in the breeze. His stern and dark look made his face look like a frozen jade and there was a bone-chilling coldness in his handsomeness. "Nangong Lu, it's over." Nangong Lu was shocked, and then said between his gritted teeth, "Chu Wanning." Tianwen exploded with a golden light, reflecting Chu Wanning's gloomy eyes which made him look even more dangerous. "Elder Yu Heng, the Baidu immortal, you should have died back at Kaidi town. Now you're here to ruin my plan again, you vile creature." Chu Wanning was stunned. He lowered his eyebrows and said harshly, "So, you indeed caused the disaster of 5 years ago." Nangong Lu saw that the matter was already exposed, so he had no intention to hide any more. He sneered and said, "So what?" Chu Wanning raised Tianwen and his fingers swept over the willow vine. The section that was touched by his fingertip glowed with a shiny light. The light was so bright it was almost platinum. His eyes were like a hawk's. "Back then, when you were seeking a holy weapon at Jinchinj Lake, the creature in the lake asked for your wife's spiritual core in exchange. You didn't hesitate to order people to cut her open and threw her spiritual core in the lake. At that time, I was disgusted to the bone and I hated you so much that I wanted to kill you. But you told me that Nangong Si is still young and can't be without a father. You said that you were entranced at that time, that it was a momentary lapse of judgment and that you regretted it fully. You even promised that from there on, you will live righteously and never do such evil deed again, you." The willow vine was touched to the tip and the golden light burst out. Chu Wanning gritted his teeth, "Nangong Lu, you are an irredeemable vicious evil being. Why are you blaming me?" Nangong Lu suddenly laughed in a low voice. "Grand Master Chu, why don't you blame yourself for being young and naive? At that time, you were just 15 or 16 years old, right? You were so stupidly naive. Just after a few empty promises, a few tears and using sea air as a cover and you let me go mercifully. Ah, Grand Master Chu, if you think about it, what I am and what I have managed to do until now was because of your leniency at that time." Before he could even finish speaking, the wind had already arrived. Tianwen cut through the dark night and slashed towards the place where Nangong Lu was standing. In an instant, the dragon light danced and flames broke through the sky, splitting the entire frozen Ganquan lake in half as the ice shattered. Nangong Lu shouted, "Rise!" The group of puppets that had been roaming around the lake suddenly had a glint in their eyes. They all turned their head towards Chu Wanning and then surged in his direction. Xuemeng's battle prowess was the strongest as he actually led the charge. Clang! Long Cheng and Tianwen collided fiercely. Chu Wanning was afraid of hurting Xuemeng, so he retreated in time and moved back a few feet. With a ruthless expression, he said, hiding behind other people, "Nangong Lu, what kind of ability is that? Ha, I made you unable to attack and unable to kill me, this is my ability." Nangong Lu laughed, "Ha ha ha. Go ahead and hit them, they are all living people, they just got hit by my Zhenlong chess stones." Chu Wanning, this young master Xue is your disciple, right? Can you bear to do it? You are helpless and can only await your death. It's the same as it was more than 10 years ago by the Jinchinj Lake. There is nothing you can do. You can only let me go, you. He suddenly stopped and the smile on his face froze. It was like a basin of cold water suddenly poured on him. Chu Wanning's eyes were too calm. He stared closely at Chu Wanning and the calmness on that person's face made him suddenly feel uneasy. He shivered. Nangong Liu's lips moved as fear seemed to suddenly engulf him. "What are you planning to do?" Chu Wanning didn't waste his time talking to Nangong Liu. His eyes were cold as he raised his hand to wave Tianwen. He then shouted, "Tianwen, 10,000 coffins." Dozens of golden vines rose from the ground, trapping the puppets that were hit by the chess stones. A thick and powerful giant vine rose like a dragon from the ice lake and ice crystals sprouted everywhere. Chu Wanning flew and sat on the ancient vine, his robe fluttering in the wind. He raised a slender and powerful hand, and said one word at a time. "Juga, come." Strands of golden light gushed out from his palms and gathered on his knees to form a jet-black gukan. The gukan's tail was curled up like a tree that was still full of vitality. The leaves on the gukan's tail were lush and the gukan's strings were translucent and icy white. The strings were constantly emitting cold air. Holy weapon Juga. Tianwen's most commonly used skill was wind, which was an offensive technique for attacking, while Juga's most commonly used skill was song, which was a healing technique. Chu Wanning only gently plucked the strings a few times and played a short section of song, and those who were hit by the chess stones already showed confused expressions. They were originally struggling under the entanglement of Tianwen's 10,000 coffins, but now they looked left and right, as if they were a little confused. Nangong Lu was furious and he silently chanted a spell. The veins on his forehead bulged and he fought against Chu Wanning, trying to counter his spell. Seeing that he was outmatched, he angrily turned around and said, "Shuanglin, go and interrupt his gukan." "Me? Sigh, fine, fine." Su Shuanglin sighed and helplessly wanted to fly to the top of the giant vine where Chu Wanning was. Unexpectedly, a black shadow flashed in front of him. Mo Ran stood in the front of him and raised his whip, blocking his path. "Elder Shuanglin, please reconsider." Su Shuanglin blinked, and suddenly sneered, "You think you can stop me? You two are really master and disciple, how touching." Chu Wanning fought while saying to Mo Ran, "The barrier. It's all set up." It turned out that Mo Ran didn't appear just now because he was ordered to set up a barrier around the Ganquan Lake. Although this heavenly rift wasn't as bad as the one in Kaidi Town, the infinite hell has some extraordinary vicious evil spirits. It would be manageable if only 3 or 5 of them came out of the rift, but if there were too many, blood would rain in the mortal realm and it wouldn't stop for a long while. Mo Ran and Su Shuanglin exchanged blows. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had exchanged 10 moves. Mo Ran said, "Elder Shuanglin, stop trying to run to my Shizun direction. The person you should be fighting is me." "Why?" Su Shuanglin suddenly laughed, "Do you have to force the opponent to fight these days? I don't want to admit this, but young man, you're a bit too fierce. Uncle is old and I'm afraid I cannot handle this kind of violence." Mo Ran was speechless. If I continue to play with you, I'll be ruined. He giggled and continued, little brother, spare me will you? Let me go so I can play a bit with your Shizun, okay? Mo Ran actually didn't know how to handle Su Xuanglin. In his previous life, he had witnessed Su Xuanglin's death with his own eyes, so he knew that he probably wasn't a bad person. Who would have thought that in this life, together with Nangang Lu, he was also the mastermind behind the scene? For a moment, he didn't know what to think, so he remained silent and focused on exchanging blows with him. Jiangui has the same interrogation ability as Tianwen. As long as he could successfully capture Su Xuanglin, it wouldn't be difficult to get the truth out of him. However, Su Xuanglin's movements were light and his techniques were much better than Nangang Liu's. He floated like a kite on the shattered ice lake. The red light of Jiangui could only hit him, but it couldn't lock him down firmly. Moreover, because he was Ye Wangzi's adoptive father, before the matter was made clear, Mo Ran couldn't help but give him some leeway. Su Xuanglin suddenly laughed evilly, that's it? Grandmaster Mo, I'll apologize to you first. Mo Ran didn't know why he said this, so he was startled, what? Because I'm going to bully your Shizun. Su Xuanglin raised his hand and a light flashed at his fingertips. A white stream of light flew towards the direction of Chu Wanning, who was playing the guqin. Mo Ran was most concerned about Chu Wanning and got momentarily distracted. Su Xuanglin's eyes darkened and his other hand pulled out the folding fan at his waist. He swiftly and fiercely thrust it towards Mo Ran's throat. Shat! In an instant, blood splattered everywhere. Although Mo Ran dodged quickly, his neck was still scratched by the sharp barbs of the fan. Su Xuanglin took back the handle of the fan, which was stained with Mo Ran's blood, and pointed to the ground. A drop of blood fell into the lake and then the bottom of the lake suddenly lit up with a green light. Looking down, he discovered that Nangang Lu and Su Xuanglin were actually guarding the core of the wood element formation. A holy weapon was submerged in the frozen lake, absorbing the wood essence of the surrounding plants. At this time, because of Mo Ran's drop of blood which was full of spiritual energy, the holy weapon suddenly burst out with a dazzling green brilliance. The earth trembled and after a few moments of silence, a fierce black blade broke out of the water, shining brightly. Su Xuanglin shouted to Nangang Lu, the forbidden spell has been activated. He's coming out, quickly go by the heavenly rift and meet him. Fight! Fight! Did they summon someone from the infinite hell in order to fight it? However, this thought only flashed through Mo Ran's mind in a short while, as when he saw the holy weapon that was floating in the air, his mind went blank. His whole body seemed to have been whipped, standing there stiffly, unable to utter a single word. It's because the weapon that has been used as the core of the wood element array was none other than Taxian Jun's vicious blade that has experienced 100 battles, the holy weapon Buletin Gui. Mo Ran suddenly felt a dull pain in his chest and his vision turned black. There seemed to be some kind of imperceptible murmurings that kept repeating itself by his ears. He couldn't breathe. He could only feel the blood from his previous life rushing towards him from the darkness, soaking his entire body. He felt disgusted as dizziness seems to overcome him, his heart beating unbearably fast. Seeing that Su Xuanglin wanted to do something with Buletin Gui, Mo Ran didn't have time to think. He raised his hand, wanting to call back the holy weapon. But as soon as his spiritual energy reached out, he heard Chu Wanning's zither music suddenly stop. He suddenly felt that something was wrong and endured the inexplicable suffocating sensation. He turned his head towards Chu Wanning. The pupils of his eyes suddenly contracted. Shizun. How could he have forgotten? Chu Wanning's spiritual core was fragile. Back when they went to Xianyuan Pavilion, the doctor at Linling Isle told him that Buletin Gui seemed to have some sort of repulsive resonance with Chu Wanning, affecting his already weak spiritual core and causing him unbearable pain. How could he forget? Mo Ran suddenly cut the connection between him and Buletin Gui, flew onto the giant vine and jumped right before the giant vine ran out of spiritual energy. He hugged Chu Wanning, who was in so much pain that his face was pale, and landed with him in the nearby orange grove. At the same time, the 10,000 coffins that Chu Wanning summoned also broke and disintegrated, but fortunately, those who were under the spell of the Zhenlong chess formation were already confused. Although they didn't completely wake up, they no longer listened to Nangong Liu's instructions. One by one, they stood there blankly, with a dreamy expression on their faces. Shizun. Mo Ran was anxious and regretful. He knelt in the snow and held the frowning Chu Wanning in his arms, stroking his face. "How do you feel?" He saw blood seeping out from the corner of Chu Wanning's mouth, and felt even more distressed. He hurriedly wiped it for him, but as he did so, he suddenly remembered that in his previous life, Chu Wanning was also lying in his arms like this, at the peak of Kunlun Mountain, bleeding from all 7 orifices and dying. And he was the same as now, frantically wiping away the mottled blood, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't wipe it clean. He felt as if he was being stabbed in the heart. His eyes were red as he asked, "Does it hurt?" Chu Wanning was greatly affected by the holy weapon. He felt as if the black saber had rushed towards his chest, trying to cut it open. What was worse was that there seemed to be many broken illusions in front of his eyes that was twisting and flickering. He shook his head, trying to shake off those blurry vision, and struggled to look in the direction of Nangong Lu. But with just a glance, the last bit of color on his face suddenly disappeared. Gathering strength from who knows where, he suddenly grabbed Mo Ran's arm and said hoarsely, "Go over there, be careful." Mo Ran saw that his face was like gold paper and his eyes flashed with great shock, reflecting the light of the fire. Light of the fire? He turned his head. What came out of the heavenly rift was no longer ghosts and monsters, but surging lava from hell. Earth fire was flowing down from the sky. Those ghosts and monsters that escaped at the same time were burned to ashes by this turbulent evil fire. They didn't even have time to cry out before they turned into a cloud of green smoke. What kind of strange situation was this? The lava from hell hung in the sky like a magnificent golden red waterfall, flowing slowly and leisurely, fire flicking dangerously. When the lava flowed to the Gangan Lake, the shattered ice and lake water were ignited like firewood and began to burn fiercely. Nangong Lu and Su Xuanglin, who were standing at the front, activated the most powerful water spell, so that they wouldn't be engulfed by the fire. Although the flow of the fire was slow, it would soon burn those who were under the spell of the Zhenlong chess formation. Mo Ran cursed as he raised his hand to make a hand seal, but he wasn't very good with the water spell. Halfway through, Chu Wanning, who was in his arms, suddenly grabbed his hand and said with a pale face, "You made the wrong hand seal. Let me do it." Mo Ran hugged him and let him sit up, but he stopped his hand. "Don't move anymore, just teach me." Although Chu Wanning was hesitant, he knew that his spiritual power was temporarily damaged, so he might not be able to cast the spell well. This was a matter of life and death, so he couldn't be careless. So he held Mo Ran's hand and put all 10 of his fingers in the right position. Then he said in a hoarse voice, "Cast the spell." The spiritual power overflowed from his fingertips and quickly formed a barrier in the air, forming a blue wave that wrapped around those puppets who hadn't regained their senses. Chu Wanning let out a sigh of relief. He wanted to praise Mo Ran, but when he looked up, he saw that under the illumination of the light of hell, there were traces of tears on his handsome face. Why was he crying? Because of whom? Chu Wanning was a little confused. Shi Mei wasn't here, Xuemeng wasn't injured, and Mo Ran didn't know who the others are. So, could he be so bold and greedy and claim that Mo Ran was crying for him? "Don't cry." Mo Ran came back to his senses and frantically wiped his face. "You're already this old, what do you still act like that?" Mo Ran only looked at him with teary eyes and asked, "Does it hurt?" Hearing him say this, Chu Wanning was stunned for a while. Then a wave of warmth like a hot spring stream spread across his still aching chest. Grief and tenderness intertwined together in his heart as he felt the sweetness despite the bitterness and pain. For the first time in his life before a great calamity, he was filled with private emotions. The timing was inappropriate, but he was helpless to stop it. It's just a small injury. It's probably because I used too much spiritual power to summon two holy weapons at the same time, so my old illness flared up. Chu Wanning raised his hand, hesitated for a moment before finally caressing Mo Ran's hair. "Don't worry, it doesn't hurt anymore." Then he turned his head and looked at the vast hellfire and that blazing flame-red lotus. His gaze gradually darkened as the pain in his eyes subsided until his looks hardened. "Try and see what Nanggonglu is trying to do, and if you found a good opportunity." He paused, then when spoke again there was no trace of hesitation as he instructed, "Kill him." Chu Wanning's eyes were full of hatred, but there was also regret in them. Nanggonglu was right. At that time at Jinchinj Lake, it was the naive 15-years-old him who had just stepped into the cultivation world for the first time without knowing much about the world who had let Nanggonglu go. He had already revealed his evil nature then, however, in consideration of the stability of the cultivation world, he kept the truth from Aussie of how his very own father sacrificed his wife for the sake of a holy weapon. It was his ignorance and naivete when he was young and his excessive kindness that led to the current situation. It was him who had let the tiger go back to the forest who had now invoked the torrential hellfire of the Red Lotus. Just what is it that Nanggonglu wanted to do? End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 164. A Shizun killer. As if responding to him, a giant skeletal foot suddenly stepped out from the boiling lava. Just its fingernails were as wide as wheels. When its foot stepped into the Ganquan Lake, half of the lake water overflowed. Immediately after, another foot stepped into the lake, crushing countless orange trees on the shore. A gigantic skeleton roared as it stepped out of the heavenly rift. It turned its stiff head and let out a howl that shook the 9 heavens. Then, it held a sharp axe with jingling shackles and fiercely chopped down on the shore with a ha sound. The huge axe fell into the ground, stirring up layers of hot waves, one after another. Mud and stones tumbled while grass and trees were instantly cut. Seeing that the place where Shuemeng was standing was about to collapse, a blue light suddenly appeared. It was Nanggonglu, holding 2 swords, waving all of his spiritual energy to resist the attack. With a loud bang, the 2 forces collided, causing the soil and broken wood to explode. Su Xuanglin, who was on the side supporting the water barrier, shouted, hit between his ribs. "Do you see it?" "I see it." Nanggonglu gritted his teeth and answered. Unexpectedly, he threw away his usual submissive appearance and attacked the giant skeleton's ribs. Mo Ran looked carefully and saw that there was a cluster of flames burning on the giant skeleton's chest. In the flames, there was a human figure that was tied up. He wanted to see more clearly, but because of the flickering flames that stirred up whenever the giant skeleton and Nanggonglu exchanged blows, he couldn't see clearly. Nanggonglu had spent a great deal of effort to summon this demon god from hell. Logically, one would assume that he did that so he can order it to do harm in the human world. Things would have been understandable then. However, looking at Nanggonglu's current stance, it seemed that he was going to risk his life to fight this thing. This was really strange. However, Mo Ran didn't have the time to think about it. Shuemeng and the others were still standing in their originally position by the lake. If the fight continued like this, they were bound to get engulfed in it. Mo Ran recalled Chu Wanning's hand gesture and shouted, "Jiangui, 10,000 coffins." Dozens of red willow vines rushed from all directions like flying snakes, wrapping up the chess pieces on the shore and then retreating to the periphery. "Not bad, you used it well." Chu Wanning's words made Mo Ran's chest warm. At this moment, the person he liked was next to him and the people he wanted to protect were also under the protection of his holy weapon. This time, Seeing how the fight was progressing so far, he felt much more at ease. He discovered that although Nangong Liu's offensive techniques were nothing impressive, his evasion and defense techniques were first-rate. He didn't know if this person had a preference for this kind of technique from the beginning, but it was no wonder that when he massacred the Rufeng sect in his previous life, this illustrious sect leader had fled faster than a rabbit. Although the giant skeleton's attack was fierce, because of its large body, its movement was slow and it failed to hurt Nangong Lu at all. Nangong Lu moved higher as he walked along its skeleton. His robe fluttered, and the bright red tassels of his bamboo hat fluttered. He stood on the giant skeleton's ribs, and through the white bones, he could see the person hanging on the skeleton's heart. Nangong Lu first shouted loudly, like a person who was relieved from extreme suffering. His voice sounded twisted and sinister. Then he looked up to the sky and laughed, "Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. I found you. Finally. I finally found you." His gleaming eyes were bloodshot in the depths of his bamboo hat. He shouted angrily and ecstatically, "I finally found you." Wrapped in the flames was a man with his eyes tightly closed. He looked thin and fragile, his face didn't have any outstanding features. It was a face that was easy to forget. Nangong Lu kept muttering, almost crazily, "I found you, I found you. Ha ha, ha 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 ha. I found you. I found you." He abruptly raised the sword in his hand, which glowed with blue light, and fiercely stabbed at the sleeping man in the core of the giant skeleton. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the deathly silent man suddenly raised his head and abruptly opened his eyes. Su Xuanglin shouted angrily from below, "Don't look at his eyes. I told you not to look at his eyes." However, Nangong Lu was too close to the man. He was caught off guard and met the man's gaze. Nangong Lu only had time to see the scarlet pupils of the dog-like round eyes, and then he felt a tearing pain all over his body. He screamed "Ah!" and fell straight down from the sky, crashing to the ground. If it wasn't for Su Xuanglin supporting a barrier to protect him, he was afraid that he would have broken all his bones and tendons. Su Xuanglin walked over quickly, stomping his bare feet on the ground. "Why did you look at him? Didn't I tell you that you will feel the pain of his soul when you look at him? You." Halfway through the scolding, Nangong Lu stood up shakily from the ground. His bamboo hat fell off, revealing his messy bun and a pair of panicked eyes under his messy hair. "Ah! Ah!" The moonlight shone on his face without any hindrance. His fingers convulsed as he painfully covered his face. However, it was useless. All the skin exposed to the moonlight quickly began to crack and burst open. Bright red tender flesh rolled out and blood flowed down continuously. "Ah! Ah!" Nangong Lu screamed and tried to use his sleeves to cover his face. However, this caused his hands and forearms to be exposed instead. His skin and flesh began to tear apart rapidly and his flesh was mottled with blood. Mo Ran and Chu Wanning watched from a distance, and they both couldn't believe it. What happened to Nangong Lu? Could it be that he couldn't be directly shine upon by the moonlight? Su Xuanglin took off his own outer robe and threw it over Nangong Liu's face, covering him completely. He himself stood in the middle of the winter night wearing only a pure white undergarment, yet he did not feel the cold in the slightest. His robe was even slightly open, his strong chest was rising and falling slightly along with his breathing. When he saw Nangong Lu sitting limply on the ground like a sieve, he got angry. He kicked the head of the sect leader with his bare feet and said, "Why are you sitting there? Get up. If you still haven't killed it by the time you finish gathering your spiritual power, you can forget about the rest of your life." Who would have thought that Nangong Lu, that trash who acted tough, would show off his weakling self at this time? He sat on the ground and cried out with snot and tears. "I'm in so much pain. I'm better off dead, really better off dead. My face is full of blood. My hands are also full of blood. I can't stand it anymore. Xuanglin, I can't stand it anymore. You do it for me. Do it for you. I have to do it for you. I have to do everything for you. Su Xuanglin flew into a rage and kicked his face again. Why don't you just give me the position of the sect leader and let me take your place? Do you think I don't want to? Nangonglu was kicked to the ground and howled, do you think I don't want to? I'm sick of it. The curse left by Luo Fenghua has harmed me for a lifetime. He made me unable to get away from this position forever. Come on. I can't wait for someone to take my place. I only hate that I can't take off this ring on my finger. Luo Fenghua. Mo Ran whispered, this name sounds familiar, like I've heard it somewhere before. That was the sect leader of the Rufeng sect before Nangonglu. As Chu Wanning listened to the conversation between the two, his brows furrowed. He was in the sect leader position for barely 2 years before he passed away from illness. Mo Ran was stunned upon hearing this. The position of sect leader was being passed down through generations of the Nangong family. How can there be a sect leader with the surname Luo? Shouldn't his surname be Nangong? Normally, the surname would be Nangong, but Luo Fenghua usurped power and became the sect leader of the Rufeng sect. Hearing Chu Wanning say this, Mo Ran suddenly remembered that he had indeed read about this person in the book that recorded the history of Rufeng sect. However, due to the chaotic history of the sect which was full of dispute and grudges, Mo Ran had lost interest in reading this book, so he just casually flipped through it and didn't delve too deeply into it. His eyes widened slightly. The sect leader position of Rufeng sect has been usurped. N. Because this matter was disgraceful and involved the current sect leader, very few people mention it nowadays. Chu Wanning said, Nangonglu didn't get his position as sect leader easily. When he was young, his father suffered from qi deviation and died. Although he was appointed as the successor before his death, Nangonglu had a younger brother. That younger brother was proud and arrogant and his skills were unparalleled. He refused to accept this decision, so on the night of his father's death, he seized the ring signifying the sect leader's power and replaced Nangonglu as the new sect leader. If the usurper was his younger brother, shouldn't his surname be Nangong? How come it was Luo? Let me finish. Chu Wanning looked at Nangonglu in the distance who was trembling as he crawled up from the ground. He tightly wrapped the clothes that Elder Xuanglin gave him and once again ran towards the flames on the giant skeleton's chest. Chu Wanning then continued. Nangong Liu's younger brother is bloody, brutal and cruel. In the short 3 months after seizing the position, he killed 2 sect leaders of the upper cultivation world. He said that it was because during the competition at the Lingshan sword discussion, those 2 made things difficult for him just because he was a bastard son of the Rufeng sect leader and that they didn't judge the competition fairly. Later, he even broke the law and captured everyone who denounced him. He dragged them to the city plaza of the Rufeng sect and dug their eyes out one by one. I didn't see this disaster with my own eyes, but it was recorded in the book that the eyes he dug out filled 3 carriages before they were transported away. Mo Ran's heart trembled, but he remained silent. At this point, Mo Ran would have normally cursed, but what right did he have to curse at this action? In this life, Chu Wanning didn't know what Mo Ran did in his previous life. Mo Ran had once almost killed everyone in the 72 cities of the Rufeng sect because of a personal grievance. He even tortured one of the city lords with lingqi fruit for a whole year before letting him die. In fact, when Mo Ran came to the Rufeng sect this time, he had always tried his best to avoid encountering that city lord as much as possible. The enmity between him and that person was too deep. He was afraid that if he saw him, he would do something crazy again. Even now, he still had a fierce nature. What right did have to curse other for being ruthless and having bloodlust? On the other side, Nangonglu approached the core of the giant skeleton step by step and once again raised his sword towards the burning flames. He was getting closer and closer, the sword in his hand glinting with a cold light. Chu Wanning said, as that person's master, Luo Fenghua couldn't tolerate his atrocities, so he rebelled together with Nangonglu. The 2 of them raised an army and then one night, they smoothly drove that person out of the Rufeng sect and took over the sect leader's seat. But under the influence of power, Luo Fenghua held the sect leader's thumb ring and he didn't give it to Nangang Lu. Mo Ran was shocked, he put it on himself. Correct. Chu Wanning said, in every sect, a sect leader has a keepsake that gives a powerful boost to their spiritual power. This type of relic recognizes its master and the sect leader ring of Rufeng sect is that type of relic. Whoever wears the ring will own it. Unless the sect leader position is being passed on, the only way to take off the ring is through death. That Luo Fenghua died after being in power for only 2 years. Could it be that Nangang Lu killed him in order to take back the sect leader's seat? Chu Wanning shook his head. The official history of the Rufeng sect says that Luo Fenghua died of illness. After he died of illness, Nangang Lu regained the sect leader's thumb ring, but who could say for sure what's the true story here? Look at how Nangang Lu tried so hard to lure this monster out to fight, even shouting curses at it. What happened that year couldn't be that simple. Mo Ran also felt that things were not so simple, but he still had a question in his heart. What about his younger brother? What happened to Nangang Liu's younger brother after he was driven out of power? He died. Chu Wanning said, on the night of the mutiny, Luo Fenghua cleaned up the sect and personally took his own disciple's life. It is said that he was hacked into pieces and chopped into minced meat. Mo Ran was speechless. He couldn't help but feel a burst of guilt. He thought to himself, if what he did in my previous life was known by Chu Wanning in this life, then wouldn't his Shizun also want to clean him up himself? Would he also want to chop and dismember his body into 10,000 pieces? Just as he was letting his imagination run wild, he suddenly heard a loud bang. Nangang Liu's sword had pierced through the man inside the giant skeleton. The giant skeleton instantly grimaced and let out an extremely painful roar. Its huge bony palms stomped on the ground, creating deep pits one after another. It angrily waved its hand and with one slap, it overturned a large patch of orange trees. The golden fruits rolled all over the ground and were crushed by the giant skeleton. In this strange smell of blood and orange fruit, the giant skeleton suddenly stopped moving. Then, it abruptly knelt on the ground. Lava splashed everywhere as its white bones instantly turned into fine powder, disappearing into thin air. Nangang Lu pulled out his long sword and caught the man who fell inside the giant skeleton. He said ecstatically, I did it. I'm free. The curse is broken. The curse is broken. Ha 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 ha. He flew down with the wind and landed on the ground. At this time, a group of cultivators from the Hall of Poetry and Music had arrived at the Ganquan Lake. They quickly realized that the situation they came upon was highly questionable. When the sect leader of Gu Yuye, Zhang Shi, saw the rolling magma, his handsome and arrogant face showed a surprised expression, boundless earth fire. He immediately waved his sleeve and raised his hand, dropping a layer of water spirit powder on the people behind him. Every sect have different defensive spells and skills. Most of them use spells, but the Gu Yuye sect use spirit powder. It's been said that this spirit powder is powerful enough to resist the sun's scorching flame. After doing all this, Zhang Shi turned around angrily and asked sternly, Nangang Lu, what's going on? Nangang Lu did not answer. He tightly held the man who was pulled out of the giant skeleton. The flames that surrounded the man's body had disappeared, along with his strength and consciousness. He did not open his eyes again and looked no different from an ordinary corpse. He fell powerlessly between Nangang Liu's claws. When Xue Zhenyang saw Mo Ran and Chu Wanning, he immediately rushed over and shouted anxiously, Ran Air, Yu Heng, are you okay? Where's Meng? Meng Air. Mo Ran quickly comforted him, Xue Meng is fine, he's over there. Xue Zhenyang looked in the direction he pointed and saw Xue Meng was wrapped in a giant vine, only his pale face was exposed. He could not help the change in his expression and staggered towards Xue Meng. Mo Ran pulled him and said, Uncle, he's only temporarily unconscious. He'll be fine in a while. He'll be safer in the vine. Don't go over there. Please stay with us. Xue Zhenyang asked anxiously, what happened? I saw ghosts and monsters coming from afar, sect leader Nangong. He turned around and saw Nangong Lu standing in the lava and the lifeless corpse in his arms. He suddenly stopped talking. He suddenly felt that something was wrong. Why did that corpse look so familiar? It seemed like a long time ago, really a long time ago. He seemed to have seen this man's face. This person's facial features were too ordinary and was not easy to place amongst the memories of the past. Xue Zhenyang could not remember it at the moment. But he felt that something was not right. In fact, everything was wrong. Just then, he saw Nangong Lu suddenly raise his face. His face was covered in blood, but the corners of his mouth were wide open. Nangong Lu was laughing and his eyes were shining with a strange light. It was completely different from his usual patronizing appearance. Ye Wangzi and Nangong Si were amongst the crowd who had arrived. Nangong Si murmured, "Father." Ye Wangzi saw Su Xuanglin next to him and said in shock, "Yufu." Su Xuanglin glanced at Ye Wangzi and shook his head, hinting for her not to come over. In the burning lava, his clothes were slightly open, and his loose white undergarment fluttered in the wind. There was a lazy smile on his face and he slightly raised his chin, looking at the bustling scene in front of him. The Red Lotus Hell. His bare feet stepped on the ground and his round toes moved, creating little sparks. Then he lowered his head, as if he was waiting for something. The light of the fire was reflected in his eyes, like a golden red carp swimming in a dark pool. Ah! Suddenly, a female cultivator in the crowd cried out in alarm. Su Xuanglin did not look up and only smiled. Of course, he knew what was happening. He had heard the sound of flesh being chewed. Behind him, Nangong Lu grabbed the corpse's shoulder. Under the moonlight, he bit open the man's neck, greedily sucking the blood as if it was juice. After that scream, no one said anything, no one denounced him. For a moment, no one understood what was going on in front of them. Everyone was shocked. The sect leader of the number 1 sect, Rufeng sect's Nangong Lu, is feasting on a corpse. How was this possible? Father! Nangong Si was the first to break down. He ran crazily towards Nangong Lu. Ye Wangzi could not hold him back, so she ran with him towards Nangong Lu. Father, what are you doing? What are you doing? Sect leader. Nangong Lu turned a deaf ear to them and continued to chew. The clothes he used to cover his face had long been removed. His red skin and flesh were constantly rolling under the moonlight, causing him more and more pain. The more pain he was in, the more frenzied he was to chew on the corpse's flesh and blood, as if it was a sweet spring, a bitter medicine, a relief that he could not get. Some cultivators could not stand it, and then sound of retching started to come from the crowd. Some people moaned weakly. How could this be? He lost his mind, madman. So disgusting. The moonlight slowly moved and shone on Nangong Liu's body. Nangong Lu first lowered his head and spasmed, saliva and pus flowing out of the corners of his mouth. Then he suddenly looked up, opened his sticky bloody mouth and shouted with a trembling voice, "Ah! Ah ah ah!" The broken flesh on his face did not heal after eating the man's corpse. It was still being torn into pieces under the moonlight. His face was already full of blood and only his eyes were still white. He threw the corpse on the ground and stepped on it. He turned around and grabbed Su Xuanglin's robes, roaring like a beast, "What's going on? Why is this not working? It's useless." His meridians were bulging, and his hands were trembling non-stop. His eyes were bloodshot, and large drops of tears rolled down because of the severe pain. "It hurts. It hurts so much. I hate that I can't die. I hate that I can't die," he shouted in a low voice, sounding desperate. Suddenly, he thought of something and let go of Su Xuanglin. He lowered his head and dug out the man's heart. Spiritual core. It must be that my strength is not enough. I'm going to eat his spiritual core. Spiritual core. Spiritual core, spiritual core. He reached into the sword wound on the corpse's chest and kept digging in it. His hands were full of blood and he looked as if he has totally lost his mind. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a sharp claw suddenly pierced into his back, penetrating through his chest. Blood spurted wildly. Nangonglu was stunned for a moment, as if he had not yet realized what had happened. He did not feel the pain and just looked back in a daze. He opened his bloodshot eyes and saw Su Xuanglin look up with a smile on his clean and fresh face. What do you want to eat? For people like you, eating anything is a waste. End chapter.